Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much indeed for sparing the time to join this latest European Parliamentary Research Service Policy Roundtable. It's in fact the second EPRS Roundtable that we've had this week. Yesterday we were talking about the future of sovereignty, and specifically European sovereignty in the context of historical arguments and debates about what that concept sovereignty has meant not only in recent decades but over recent centuries. And now we turn to what might appear at first blush to be a slightly drier subject, statistics, data, and trust. But the addition of the third word, trust, and the subtitle, Why Figures Matter in Today's World, means that this is no less an interesting and indeed highly political subject. And it's become more so in recent years. The whole debate a few years back about the war against truth, about disinformation, which remains, of course, a huge problem throughout Western democracies, and the importance of evidence-based policymaking, which is something which here in the European Parliamentary Research Service we attach a great deal of importance to, and we promote this notion of empowering through knowledge on the basis of facts, means that not only has this become a mainstream debate, but it's also become something which is central to the current crisis. Because whilst the coronavirus crisis has been obviously a ghastly event for people everywhere, it is also thrust into the absolute center of public debate the role of scientists and experts in different ways. And now the kind of casual assertion we've had enough of experts really looks totally out of date, because experts have become mainstream players in the public debate. Now, this is both an important development and it's a major opportunity for those of us who are committed to the notion of evidence-based policymaking. So what better moment then, as we return after the summer holiday without any certainty of what's going to happen next on so many fronts, to discuss some of these issues. And we've put together a world-class panel to really address them. And we'll be hearing from Mariana, KOTZEVA, the Director General of Eurostat, the European Commission's data collection and analysis agency, in effect, in Luxembourg. We've got Stefan SCHWEINFEST, who's very kindly joining us from New York, so I think it's probably still morning there. And great to see you. Thanks for joining us. He's the head of the UN Statistics Division. He's played an important part in helping define global statistics, not just European, but global statistics standards and accuracy. And we have some colleagues from within or around the EPRS. We have Gaby, the Director of GlobalStat and part-time professor at the European University Institute in Florence, who used to work for the EPRS and helped act as our interface between the work that we've been doing in the Parliament and the academic and think tank community. And GlobalStat, which she has really put together down in Florence, is critical in really making available in a much more accessible way than normal an awful lot of official data, which then can be used by policymakers, think tankers, and others. And we have our own Giulio, who's head of our Statistical and Data Visualisation Support Office in EPRS, and is the person who really transposes the data into the exciting and very attractive infographics, which we try to make a distinctive feature of our output. So welcome to all of you. And moderating the discussion will be Etienne Bassot, the Director of the Members Research Service in EPRS. So I think we've got an excellent afternoon discussion ahead of us. And before that, we are going to hear some introductory remarks very kindly given by the Vice President in the European Parliament responsible for communication with the public, but also for many of the activities of the European Parliamentary Research Service, namely Othmar has been a distinguished member of the European Parliament for many years, is a member of the Economic and Monetary Committee, is a member of the Delegation for Relations with the United States, is a member in his capacity as Vice President of the Parliament of the Parliament's Bureau, and also a former member of the Austrian Parliament, and therefore full understanding of the pressures on national policymakers as well as at European level. And he's very kindly recorded a video, which hopefully will now play. So over to Vice President Karas.
Dr. KOTZEVA, Dr. SCHWEINFEST, Mr. SABBATI, Professorin UMBACH, Chair Etienne. Ladies and Gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde, I am delighted to open this event on the topic Statistics, Data and Trust, with one important question for all of us. Why figures matter in today's world? I am delighted for three reasons. First, as an economist by training, and today as a member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee of this Parliament. Let me raise a few questions. How is the European economy doing? With climate change making us redesign our economy, how many jobs can the circular economy deliver? How will the situation in Afghanistan impact on migration and asylum in Europe? By the way, these topics are so urgent and important that we can expect to hear about all of them next week in the State of the Union address. On all these issues, we need statistics, we need data. We need data to understand, we need data to make informed choices, we need data to assess our actions. In other words, we need data for politics and to make policies. So definitely, as an economist, I can only welcome an event focused on why figures matter in today's world. A second reason why I am delighted to open this event, as the Vice President of the European Parliament responsible for the Members' Research Service and the Library, these professionals, notably under the leadership of our moderator Etienne Basson, provide hundreds of publications every year. They answer thousands of requests every year. Mr. SABBATI's team works to deliver impartial, objective, accurate infographics, always under the same motto: empowering through knowledge. Think about today's question, how figures matter in today's world. I am struck how much the world of statistics and the world of parliamentary research have in common. Both help us to understand. Both help us to take informed decisions, better decisions. Both empower us through knowledge. The different examples I have just mentioned, economy, climate, migration and asylum, geopolitics, are all covered by infographics produced by the Parliamentary Research Service. Many of them in cooperation with its Florence-based partner on developments in a globalized world, GlobalStat. I am glad the European Parliament Research Service has taken up the challenge of providing members of the Parliament with the information they need for their work. Third, I am delighted to open this event as Vice President of the European Parliament. I have referred so far to statistics and data. These are two words from our event's title. Both these two words, statistics and data, are nothing if we cannot trust them. We need trust, especially as we face growing contestation of politics and politics of contestation. To quote Professorin UMBACH, the founding director of GlobalStat, who is with us today, we need trust. Trust, the third word of today's event. One might expect that in today's Europe, this goes without saying that we can take it for granted. Well, that is not so sure. When the figures are not so good, the temptation to fiddle them is strong. Andreas Giulio was appointed head of the Statistical Institute in Greece in August 2010. He committed to delivering statistics that would meet the highest international and European principles and standards. I insist on these UN fundamental principles of statistics and on the European Statistics Code of Practice, as we have today the honor to welcome the Director General of Eurostat and the Director of the United Nations Statistics Division, UNSTATS, the UN administration par excellence, highly professional, standard setter, cooperation focused. Congratulations to UNSTATS and to Dr. SCHWEINFEST. Back to Greece and Mr. Giulio. Soon after his appointment, he encountered a series of practical and political obstacles, pressures to adjust some political sensitive data. What about the principle of professional independence? Obstacles to recruiting the people he deemed necessary. Difficulties in deploying the resources he needed to reform and modernize the Institute. I mention only a few of the obstacles he encountered in his work on the country's debt and deficit. We should note that Eurostat repeatedly validated the figures he published. I want here to congratulate Eurostat for standing for strong, reliable, independent statistical institutions. However hard the truth may be, congratulations to Eurostat and to you, Mrs. KOTZEVA. Today, 10 years later, her prosecution is still continuing. Against this background, I am so proud that the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee has shown its overwhelming support for Mr. Giulio's integrity. How? By voting for his appointment as a member of the European Statistical Governance Advisory Board. In other words, by voting for him to join the highest instance providing an independent overview of statistics in Europe, the guardian of the European Statistics Code of Practice. With this vote, we stand by him. With this vote, we stand for ethics. With this vote, we stand for trust. With this vote, we stand for independence over interference. As the defender of European values, a vote I hope the Conference of Presidents will now endorse in the coming days. This vote joins wide international support at the highest level, from fellow heads of statistics offices to prestigious academics to Nobel laureates. This shows how invaluable trusted data are for our societies, for our democracies. Ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, as you see, there are many reasons why I am happy to open this event. Let us explore why figures matter in today's world. Thank you. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice President Karas, and for the important message which you communicate, not only about the work that we're doing, but also the importance of upholding an independent European statistics culture. And the panel that we have is going to be able to debate what that practically means in terms of support for policy making. I'm going to pass the baton now to Etienne Bassot, who's going to moderate the discussion. Thank you once again for the almost 100 people who are online for this discussion, which I think goes to the heart of a crucially important issue right now in terms of public policy. Over to you, Etienne.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and thank you also, Vice President Karas, for your opening words. I'm also delighted to welcome our speakers in Luxembourg, New York, Florence, and Brussels today. This is the nice thing with these online meetings, to be able to gather the best speakers around the world to discuss an issue, and here we are today. I would like also to welcome our online audience. As you said, Anthony, more than 100, those who are not visible but are listening. And you will be able to participate in the discussion after the presentations by the speakers. So our speakers are today Mariana KOTZEVA, Director General of Eurostat. Hello, Mariana. Stefan SCHWEINFEST, Director of the United Nations Statistics Division. Hello, Stefan. Giulio SABBATI, who is heading our EPRS office dedicated to data visualization and statistics. Hello, Giulio. And also Gaby, Professor at the EUI, Director of GlobalStats. Welcome, Gaby. Why figures matter in today's world? To introduce this topic, I would like to invite Mariana KOTZEVA as the first speaker. Mrs. KOTZEVA has been Director General of Eurostat within the European Commission since 2018. She joined Eurostat already in 2012, and before that she held various high-level positions, including the head of the Bulgaria National Statistical Institute. By training, she is an economist and has a PhD in statistics. And she also teaches statistics at the University of Sofia in Bulgaria. Over to you, Mariana, to open the discussion by your first presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Etienne. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm struggling with sun. As you see, it's sunny in Luxembourg. And this shows that the climate is also very favorable to today's topic of discussion. And this topic cannot be boring, as you have already seen from the introduction of the Vice President Karas. So therefore, I'm very delighted to join this conversation today, similar to the Vice President Karas, because for people like me and like Stefan, statistics is actually the whole life. So, and we are very happy to join you, because we are very convinced that statistics is fundamental and data fundamental for making better decisions, informed decisions, and which could result in better results in the economy, the society, and in better lives. So I have the pleasure to actually start the panel discussion. Therefore, I would like very shortly to bring some points to put forward them to the attention of my colleagues as well, and to our dear audience, so that we could start the conversation. The last decade has seen very interesting developments, which on the one side have been very exciting, on the other side have been very challenging. On the good side, there was such an explosion of data, usually due to the digital revolution, that everybody could be happy, because more data means more information, more informed decisions, and respectively better decisions. On the other side, we have seen also that with the explosion of data, there have been attempts for disinformation, and also we have been seeing a lot of not so good data floating around. So therefore, starting with my points, which I'd like to bring to the discussion, my first point will be that in today's world, the facts matter, the data matter, but what matter is the ability to distinguish between good data, good statistics, and bad data and bad statistics. Because it's very important that the decisions are based on good data, on high quality data and statistics in all aspects of this concept of high quality and what means good data. For example, objectivity, accuracy, relevance, these are among the characteristics. So this is the first point which I would like to bring to the discussion, that it's crucial for us today and in the coming years to be able to distinguish high quality statistics and data, and to use exactly them for making decisions. Related to that, of course, is the crucial question how to recognize which data are good and which data could be trusted. What are criteria to do that? And this is important for professionals, for those, for example, like Giulio and Gaby, who are trying to find the good data in order to make good infographics and good analysis. But it's also important for policymakers. It's becoming increasingly important for citizens as well, who has to have a compass, who has to be able to be oriented in this ocean of information. And the next point is about trust. Also, Anthony said at the beginning, and the Vice President Carlos mentioned that we need to trust the data. And those who are using the data need to trust the data. But those who are producing the data, like us, like official statisticians, they have to get this trust. We have to build up this trust, and we have to maintain this trust. And finally, the people who listen, the producers of data, who listen the analysis, who look at our infographics and other visualizations, they need also to trust the data. Otherwise, at the end, eventually the decisions, the policies, which are based on this data cannot be legitimized. They have to be trusted. So there is a chain of trust which needs to be discussed. My final point is, in order to get the trust, I personally, I am a very strong believer in communication, in the right communication and dissemination, in presenting statistics and data in an understandable, in exciting way, because this is, I think you agree with me, because this is also a kind of way to gain trust. Because if you understand the data, if you understand the messages, if you believe that they sound trustworthy, this could help you to distinguish the good from bad data, and also to be able to trust to good data. Therefore, I will conclude with the kind of statement that for me and for our team, Eurostat team, as producers of official statistics, the key challenge is to remain a trustworthy reference point for data and statistics on Europe. And for that, we are working very closely with our international partners under the leadership of UN system, because Europe is part of the global statistical family. And it's very important to have comparable statistics, to have statistics based on the same definition, that we understand in the same way what refugee means in Europe and what refugee means in Asia, what climate change means in Europe and what climate change means in Africa, for example. So therefore, with that, I will, of course, on the global standards, I will easily pass the floor to Stefan, because he could also tell you how we ensure the good quality of official statistics across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for this scene-setting presentation. Let us move now to our second speaker. You said Mariana spoke about the statistical family in the world, and I think we have the top of this family, or the father of this family. We are privileged to have with us Stefan SCHWEINFEST, who is director of the United Nations Statistics Division in New York. And UNSTAT compiles and disseminates global statistical information, develops standards and norms for statistical activities, including the integration of geospatial, statistical, and other information. And you act also as a support to the UN countries, to the countries in the world. I'd like also to mention that Stefan is by training a mathematician economist. And if I'm not mistaken, he studied in Würzburg, Germany, Paris, and London at the LSE. So it's a true European also that we have with us today. Over to you, Stefan.
No, thank you very much. I was very much looking forward to this discussion today, and I'm wildly determined to enjoy it. I mean, thank you very much to the EPRS for inviting a UN perspective. I'm in a very illustrious company, in particular when I'm always in the company of my dear friend Mariana, and the data item of how many 100 years we have known each other and worked together is strictly confidential. I got a little bit nervous with Anthony's introduction when he said this could be perceived as a dry topic. I think I need to send around the article of the New York Times that a couple of years ago suddenly stated that statistician is now among the top 10 sexy professionals. I didn't see that coming when I started, but I don't mind too much. So this is where I'm coming from. Let me talk about the three words in our title: statistics, data, and trust. Statistics, let me start with the UN perspective. We all speak a common language here, and I'm not only referring to English, we speak statistics. And I mean, in order to do that, is we need global standards so that we understand each other, as Mariana already said that. And I always see standards not as a straitjacket. It's an enabler. It's what makes us what makes it possible to compare, to talk to each other, and even to learn from each other. If somebody has figured out a good solution somewhere, how to run a census or how to compile GDP or how to measure a new phenomenon, we should share that. And that's what we are trying to do in the UN. The UN Statistical Commission is the annual meeting of the 193 chief national statistician. And I like to call it the family. It is a community of professionals. And we develop these standards. So these standards are not developed by me or my team in a dark room in the United Nations. They are built on national practices, on best practices, on what works around the world. And we have experts groups that lead to standards, and that we also do not just put these standards out there and say, live with it now. We have elaborate implementation and capacity building strategies around the world. And of course, the many developing countries around the world desperately need our support to be part of this global family and talk this language. And in this context, I also wanted to recognize the important role that Europe plays always, not only in the standard formulation by making your knowledge and your experiences available and being part of the discussions. Let me just mention environmental accounting is a topic that Europe has been leading over the last 20 years, and the knowledge and the experiences have been shared with the rest of the world. And then also in the professional solidarity, help other countries to implement the standards and not just hear about them. So Europe is very committed, and with Eurostat and Mariana's team, we have various trust funds where we can actually help developing countries to implement important international standards. And as a UN person, I'm very, very thankful for that. Now, let me talk a little bit about data. Data, we had just an interesting discussion this morning with the Bureau of the Statistical Commission of what's the difference between statistics and data. We talk about the larger data ecosystem, and I think Mariana explained already, like how in the last decade, data, especially geospatial data, big data, all kinds of official, non-official data, what we call now the data ecosystem, it has become much more broader. And we have to struggle a little bit. What is the role of the statistical offices? And I like the concept of data stewardship, because we have tools and that we can offer to the rest of the data community, like quality control, overtime consistency, the importance of international comparabilities, and so on and so forth, which I think we can offer to the larger data community. And also always the pressure of a good data item needs to be efficiently produced. I mean, the resources are always limited, and it needs to be used properly. I mean, fitness for purpose, relevance is also a quality dimension. So we have that experience, and of course with the census and national household surveys that become the reference points, I often say that official statistics is and has to remain the foundation or the spine of any national information system that can be much larger and requires the cooperation of many more players. But I mean, in order to know whether something is a good indicator, you need to know whether it's representative, and you can only know if you have the baseline tools like a census or a sample survey available. So I think that's an important, good relationship that we are building with the data communities. And we, in a few weeks, will have what we call the UN World Data Forum, where we invite all members of the data community, whether they are from the private or public sector, governments or civil society, to have an open discussion on how we move good data forward. Now, the last important element of our title is trust. How we build trust, and I think Mariana already mentioned the key word. It's all about communication. We have to tell what is a data item all about. I mean, I always say young people need to learn that the first question they ask whenever they see a number is, where is this number coming from? Whose number is this? What's the story, I mean, behind it? Who produced it and why? In what circumstances? And so we have, of course, good data is data based on scientific, solid production processes, transparency. This is also where metadata come in and our footnotes. I know we are not always very popular with this, but I mean, that is important to tell the story where a data item is coming from and legitimize it. And questioning data is a good reflex. Our users should always do that, and we as producers should never be worried about this happening. So we have at the global level what we call the United Nations Fundamental Principles of Official Statistics. They are almost 30 years old now, actually. And they talk about also the principles that really distinguish bad and good statistics. And it mentions also organizations and management of statistical systems. We need legislation, data protection, independence. Those are all key elements of ensuring that we're producing good data items. And that puts the national statistical offices plainly at the center of perhaps leading and managing a much wider national information system. And that's what we are struggling with, how to do that effectively in partnership with all of the other data producers and in sync with what the users really need, because data relevance is, of course, an overriding principle too. So, two key words that I've learned in my long UN career: communication and cooperation, and this panel is all about that. So what better could I do with my New York morning today than sharing the rest of the morning with you in an animated debate, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for sharing with us so many ideas and thought-provoking remarks. I am going now to move to Giulio and Gaby. Giulio is our own data-viz and statistician within the EPRS. He has been with us since the very beginning of the EPRS in 2013. It's very critical to the work of the parliamentarians to have such an office in the European Parliament. As you mentioned, Stefan and Mariana, you are generating these statistics and data, but we need to make them available in a form that is adapted to the policy making, and we do that in two forms: by publications, but also by responding to confidential inquiries that they send to us every day. We have about 3,000 of such inquiries in a year. So we are I'm very proud as a manager to have Giulio with us, and we are very proud of his work, and I'm happy to hand over to him for his presentation, and I understand he will have a couple of slides. Over to you, Giulio.
Thank you, Tim. Why figures matters in today's world? I'd like to start with, let's take someone very famous in measuring, and let's take this certain Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin, in the 18th century, he developed the Kelvin scales, and which basically is the unit of temperature. And this unit of temperature is now the international system of units. And Kelvin said something I think is very interesting, and it is, if you can't measure it, you cannot improve it. So I think it's very true. I think it's very true, this comment, both in terms of everyday life and also work-wise. Let's imagine everyday life. I don't know, imagine that we want to lose weight. And if you want to lose weight, you need to step on the scale, you need to take a measure of your result, you need to look, am I doing well, am I arriving where I want? If you don't look at the data, if you don't measure it, well, you don't know what is the action that you should take afterwards. And what about policymakers? Well, policymakers, I think it's applied the same, the same theory, the same thing. Imagine, I don't know, climate change. Climate change, if you don't measure, for instance, let's say, data on emission, well, you know where you are, you don't know where you want to go, you don't know what can be the action, you don't know how to take the next action. So let me pass to another point now. We all mentioned this one, but also our Vice President, Mr. Karas, mentioned before. Data and statistics are nothing if we cannot trust them. I think that the message comes from everybody, and here is this where I want to focus a bit on it. So trust, what does it mean for a data user, as I am, and as in our office, to disseminate data with infographics and being trustworthy? How can we stimulate, how can we inspire trust? I think there are 3 points. One is the reliable data. Reliable data means that we use data that come from institute that has international European principle and standard. And we heard everything of this. I mean, we have 2 good examples in our e-room. We have the fundamental principle of statistics from UN, as mentioned by Stefan, and also we have the European Statistical Code of Practice from Eurostat. So this is a first point which I think is very important from trust. The second one is clear message. You need to have a clear message. It's important to say something with a visual. You should inform, you should be neutral, you should be impartial, objective, accurate. You don't do a graph just for the sake of doing a graph or because you want to put some color on your paper. You do a graph because you want to give, you want to make an insight of the data that you analyzed. And then there is the first part, which is ethics. Ethics in the sense that statisticians, in the large family of the statisticians, whatever the task is, if it's collection of data or visualization or communication of data and so on, we all need to follow a certain ethic, a certain, we need to follow a certain ethic. And why we need to do this one? Because we want to show the truth data. We don't want to make a misrepresentation of data or misunderstanding of data. Okay, now I would like to show a couple examples. So if Cecile can go to one of my first graph, if it's possible, if you think it works. I prepared 3 examples that are based on my everyday experience, or let's say our everyday experience, because we are 5 or 6 working in visualization plus other colleagues. So it's example of the things that come during the day that I want to show what it is I think is good and what it is not, what it is trust and not. So I said it's important a clear message, but it's important also the visual that we use for this clear message. Cecile, you have the chance to...
Yes, the PowerPoint is on display.
Okay, so, which I don't see it, but it will come out. So in the first example, sorry?
It's slide 4, and we go on. So just mention the slide I have to show, and I will show it.
Okay, so here the first, there is a bar chart and a line chart on that slide. In this example, we talk about the impact of COVID on tourism sector. The message on the paper was that certain countries were, in a European country in particular, that depend a lot on tourism, were hidden by, let's say, the restriction of traveling, and so their revenue was decreasing. The visual highlights 3 different elements or fatalities and 2 different years. If you look on the graph on the left, so let me put the question. Is those both messages clear? Well, the reality is that in the first one, so on the left, is a kind of misleading. If you look at the first instance, it seems that there are 3 years, while in reality we talk about a different scenario for the second year, so the 2020. So if you understand my point, it is important to choose which visual, the right visual that allowed you to give the message. Next slide. Are you there?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, perfect. So the next slide is the turnout at the EP elections in '79. If you press twice, you should have the both of the graph. And as you can see, there are two graphs which look similar just because they are a line chart. But on the first one, the scale is 40% to 70, while the second one, the one on the right, is a scale from 0 to 100. So I think that the different message that the two different graphs with the same data, the message that it gives is completely different. It's absolutely incredible how you can change the reality of the data. If you look at the graph on the left, it seems like that 40% of the people not even vote. I mean, you're missing 40% of the people. It even strange, it looks like in 2009, 2019, 2014, we are almost at 0. Plus the curve is much more deeper than what it is. So what about ethics in this case? I mean, let's not cut the axis. It distorts the message, it does not make it clear, and I think it does not inspire trust.
Let's do that way. Keep your final comments, Giulio, for the discussion. We will have the chance to come back. And I would like to hand over to Gaby Umbach. Gaby Umbach is a part-time professor at the European University Institute in Florence, and she's also director of GlobalStat and the Age 2020 Trigger Consortium, member leading global governance research. She's also adjunct professor in Cologne and Innsbruck. She had published various books, and her research includes the analysis of measuring and the use of statistics as governance technique, data-based governance, data and evidence literacy in policymaking, evidence-informed policymaking, multi-level governance, as well as eco-social policies and sustainable development. So a lot on the plate. And as Anthony said at the beginning, Gaby has been with us for a couple of months as a fellow in the EPRS. So she knows also very well this world of the members of the parliament, the EPRS, and the constraint in working in a political environment. So over to you, Gaby, to share your remarks with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Etienne. And it's a super honor to be on that panel with the esteemed and well-established experts and panelists. I'm very happy about that. Thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, it's a pity that Giulio couldn't finish his presentation, because that leads to some of the points I want to make. And I also want to work a bit around the question of why. Why data statistics is important, how issues in trust come up, and potentially what we can do about that. So let me start my intervention with some general remarks and then 3 points. One is on the role of data in policymaking in general. The other one go to politicization and contestation of data. And the other one's finally to data literacy, and that would connect with Giulio's presentations, who very well show what I have in mind when I talk about data literacy. So some general remarks. What we're talking about when we talk about the use of data for and in policymaking is not just to underline an argument with a figure. Statistics and state power have been interconnected ever since the beginning of the enlightened state. So it started off with forest management, these so-called Normalbaum, so the normal definition of a tree, to count the trees in forest management, taxation, so aggregate data on the state as a collective has been important. Hence, measuring and executive power, government have always been, since the enlightened state, put together, work together as a way of doing things. And hence, statistics have always been key tools to quantify, but also qualify and compare complex processes, structures, and have hence been and still are essential for collective political action. that as a general remark. So we're not talking about nice to put a figure on something that I want to underline. It's essential. Data is essential for collective political action. The use of data in policymaking has two main effects, which refer to knowledge and which refer to governance. Knowledge effects are basically related to the fact that statistics are linked and are the foundation of many aspects of the overall societal knowledge production process. So whenever we collect data, whenever we establish a figure, we naturalize elements that we see, quantifiable objects that become in our society macro social realities. So it's not just about counting something. And that's what will lead us later on to the contestation we're currently facing. So it's a metrological attitude towards something we realize and we monitor in our societies. Hence, they are the basis for multidimensional judgments, which is important. However neutral the production should be, the use in least of the cases is neutral. I will come back to that. Governance effects. Measuring is a political process because of normativity enshrined in statistics. And it's also part of the political process. We have seen that in many of the assessment, impact assessment, ex post, ex ante evaluation processes. Using statistics in data change the way of politics, change the way we do politics. Hence, data and the use of statistics are an instrument of governance. And by this quality, statistics actually morph into policy tools, which will have an impact on how they are used in contestation and for politicization. So these policy tools, statistics as policy tools, naturally establish formal and informal regulatory or para-regulatory practice that we know in the European context with the European semester, for example, but also in other contexts. These are governance practices that are used to evaluate, to assess countries in the international context, also to steer official development assistance, for example. So they have become political power resources. So it's not just that we use statistics in policymaking to underline something and to show, to produce evidence for something. It has become a political power resource to use statistics. Hence, access to data and the understanding, the correct understanding of data is so important. Within policymaking, we can differentiate broadly. Many more are there, but a functional and a political role of statistics and data. So the functional role we all know is agenda setting, for example. We take a figure to outline a policy, to start with a policy, whereas to define the problem, right? To steer policymaking, the open method of coordination processes are a case in point here. But also to stimulate innovation in policymaking, different correlations of aspects of different variables are cases in point for this. So, but most importantly, for evidence-informed policymaking as we define it contemporarily, as compared to interest or pure value politics, the factual basis for policymaking is important and is more important potentially than ever before in the history of politics, and hence data are in the unique position to potentially be one of the most robust factual evidence that we can provide for policymaking. If we look at the political use of data, things become a bit more tricky because this political use is partially tactical, it's strategic, it's normative, it's symbolic, and hence here the power resource, data as a power resource becomes more important. Actors foster trust and acceptance of policy decisions through the use of statistics. They justify policy decisions. Sometimes they even blame data, the current state of something, as evidenced by data for a particular decision. So here, indeed, the para-regulatory power, the regulatory power to guide policies brings us to the second point that I want to highlight, to the problem that data and statistics are not only subject to, but can enhance contestation and politicization within politics, even if they don't want to. So contrary to what one might normally think, quantification is not really neutral. Neither neutral nor technical. Every one of us working with statistics and who's passionate about data will tell you that measuring always is an interest and value-laden process. The sheer definition of an indicator is a value decision. So let me just put some examples in health matters, for example. As we do not have a lot of information on mental health, potentially the subject will not be high on the political agenda. How we define and measure intergenerational equity still is something that we are working on, that we are elaborating on. Hence, potentially, the political agenda is not absorbing it. So the definition and measuring, the definition of statistics and measuring creates opportunity structures, and opportunity structures for the normative framing of policy content. That's why it's so important. So data and statistics stand in for something that we want to see, that we want to measure. If we look at criminal statistics, for example, tax evasion oftentimes features not prominently because we don't measure it, right? So here, actually, we make measurable, and that links to the quote of Kelvin that Giulio presented. To make measurable means that we can frame political actions based on statistics. So it's a super important function of data in policymaking. Another element of this function, this framing function, is the fact that by creating these social realities, obviously, we impact on behavior, we impact on worldviews, we impact on value judgment because it's there, because we can put a figure on something. Obviously here, perception, values, and emotion come in. And that's something that we're currently, I do think, facing in our debates, which is the normative power of statistics and data, opening up room for politicization because of value judgments and perceptions, and hence opening up the room for contestation of politics, the element that Vice President Karas mentioned at the beginning. So data becomes subject to political discourse, to scrutiny, to contestation, politicization. And through this element, data can be used to politicize and for interest-based politics because of the power that is attached to data. The example that Vice President Karas mentioned of Greece, but also of Tanzania, where with the reform and the amendment of the Statistical Acts 15 and 2018 went even more in the weaponization of data, statistics, show how much political the use of statistic has become. So data use has become subject to contestation in politics. At the same time, and because of what I previously said, obviously, the data use also fuels politics of contestation. Stability and Growth Pact, but also what we saw about the contestation of COVID data by some heads of government from Latin America and America, cases in point here. So here lie the current issues when we discuss the post-factual trends, questions of trust and misinterpretation, which obviously brings me naturally, because today is UNESCO International Literacy Day, to data literacy. And that's a point that the other speakers have touched upon before. And that's also a point that is super essential for evidence-based policymaking as we define it. So to understand how we can make people collect, manage, evaluate, and apply data in a critical way. Institutionally, individually, the capacity to select, evaluate, and process data. And here I want to link to the ethics question also that Giulio raised. So dimensions of data use are not only the knowledge about data and the skills. So where do I get data? What does data mean? And how was data produced? What can I do with data? The value question, the ethics question, limits of data use. What can't I say with data? Which questions do I have to raise to understand data? Understanding the overlap of information, data, and statistical literacy, and defining what elements of data literacy are necessary in policymaking to ask the right questions. I'm happy to discuss this further. I want to stop here to give us a bit more room for discussion. And I'm very, very excited to be on that panel and to discuss with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gaby, and thank you to all panelists for these very, very interesting presentations. And I think we have now a lot of ground for our discussion. We have about half an hour for this discussion. And I would like to react to questions are coming in, by the way, in the Q&A and the chat. And please continue to do so. That makes it exciting for us. I would like just to take that last remark that Gaby made about literacy and Literacy Day. And probably this question is for Mariana and Stefan. In a competitive environment where there is a lot of information, in a world surrounded by data from so many different sources, what factors do you see as important to ensure that you continue to remain a trustworthy point of reference for statistics and data on Europe for Mariana, but on globally for Stefan? And I want to link to a question that we received in the chat from Nereus Prekevicius. I hope I pronounced correctly. And this attender is interested to know if you can say that there is a profile of users. If you have observed on your side a certain profile of users who have access, would like to access to public data sources, if we can define them in a way. And that links very much to this question of literacy that Gaby was mentioning. Maybe we start with these two questions to both Mariana and Stefan, and then I will go back to Giulio if he had something to share that we missed in the technical problems, and then come to other questions. Who wants to start? Mariana, maybe first, and then Stefan.
Okay, thank you very much for the very interesting question, because this is the question, how in today's competitive world we continue to be trustworthy reference point for statistics and data on Europe, for example, in European context. And there are many conditions, so I try simply to list some of them, and then I'm sure Stefan could add and could continue this list. So you could approach this question from a different angle. First point, in order to be, if you look from more market point of view or economic point of view, first you have to be competitive, which means that your commodity has to be demanded. When we are speaking about statistics, this means that we have to be relevant, we have to be timely, we have to be, maybe I will emphasize this too, and relevance is extremely important, and timeliness. And this is becoming a challenge because on the one hand, we have more data sources, which like big data, for example, or digital, any kind of digital data, which allows to produce faster statistics and with greater details, which is very important. But on the other side, you have to keep quality. So cheap and dirty is not always the best solution. So what is important for us as official institution, and what has been a policy and efforts of Eurostat, is to follow the latest developments, to try to use the best possible sources, and to update our methodologies in order really to get the best of the best sources. But I also want to use this opportunity because we are this discussion is organized by the European Parliament, and the European Parliament always has been a good user and also supporter of official statistics. In order to use the data, we need access to data. This is extremely important. And you know, historically, the statistics started with surveys, then our input sources were expanded to public administrative sources, and there was a battle historically to get that access. Now we are approaching a stage when we have to ensure access for official statistics to privately held data, to data which are produced by online platforms, by any kind of products of Internet of Things time. Of course, in order to get this access, we are opening many questions of respecting privacy, privacy by design, Also, this is a new challenge for us as producers, because it's not necessary anymore to bring the data to us. We could, some data processing could happen close to the source of data. So to sum up, in order to give opportunity to my colleagues to come in, it's important that we constantly strive to be relevant, to measure the right things using the best sources, the best technologies, up-to-date technologies, but we need to get access to this data in order to do that. The second element, a very important condition, is that we have to show to the outside world that we need to be, that our statistics are of high quality, and this has to be communicated. The value proposition of official statistics has to be communicated. And then on the other side, there should be on the other side people who are able to understand and to distinguish what is of good quality and what is of bad quality. And Gaby has elaborated very well the issue of the data literacy, so I just want to add it to the list. And final point, since we are in Europe, and since we, even the Vice President Karas mentioned at the beginning, the case of Greece and also the fundamental principles of official statistics, it's very important not only to speak about technical side of statistics, like how to calculate, what is accurate, what are the sources, but also about that official statistics in Europe and globally is based on principles. And in Europe is based on strong legal framework. And actually the Greek cases has been beneficial to European statistical system, because due to that, since 2010, the legal basis on which official statistics operates has been very much made stronger, not only in the general European law on statistics, but also in specific fields like public. For an example, Eurostat has got even verification powers and audit powers, and also the possibility to impose fines in case of manipulation of statistics or distortion. So, but this is not known by people, so we have to communicate that. And in that sense, I will conclude with saying that we have a common mission with the European Parliament, because we are defending democracy somehow. And in Eurostat, we really have been very grateful to the European Parliament, because you always have been very strong in speaking that official statistics has to be supported with a strong legal and institutional framework, and to ensure to have the bodies like it was mentioned about European Statistical Advisory Board, who are guardians of the European Code of Practice of the law, so that this is also a condition to be distinguishable as a objective, trustworthy and high quality official statistics provider in Europe. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for these comments. Over to you, Stefan.
No, thank you. I mean, of course, Mariana mentioned all the basic elements. I think I can add a little bit. And I should also say I'm jealous, of course, of Mariana and the power that she has in the context of the European community, because that's certainly not the case of the United Nations. I mean, well, I think the only power I have is to cajole and try to convince somebody. But on the other hand, that's sometimes also good, because I mean, when you succeed, it's very sustainable. No. My father was a marketing director, and he very early on told me, I said, to get a product, I mean, to a customer and to make the customer happy, you need two things. You need a really good product, but you need also the whole process of marketing it and bringing it to and selling it to the customers. And I think that was perhaps one of the capital sins of the classical statistician, because I think we stopped at the end of the assembly belt. I mean, we were saying, oh, we put this national accounts data together and we double, triple, and quadruple check. Now they are good, and now we go on vacation. And we forgot to open the factory gate and carry our official data out into the sun and make sure the people know about them, know about the value of that information, and make sure that they are used properly and responsibly. And I think that has really fundamentally changed. there are many elements where, I mean, we were talking always about data dissemination. We don't do that anymore. We're talking about data communication. So, I mean, we are not just sitting here and giving you something, and we're communicating with the users, and we're double checking. We also, in the fundamental principles, it talks about the right, and I would even say the duty of the statistical producer to opine on misuse of information. I mean, a misuse of data. I mean, interpretations of data that are not founded in the production process. So I think we as statisticians have embraced a lot more responsibility in the post-production process, as I like to call it, and I think that is critically important. I mean, this has become part of our business to engage with the users. I think your related question is also very important, that the colleague asked, do we actually know our users? And that we didn't. Some years ago, we didn't. I just put out a statistical yearbook of the United Nations. I was very proud of myself. And then I never knew who was touching it. Now, of course, with the databases, and we can measure who is actually downloading our data and what are they doing with the data. That engagement with the user, this is why this dialogue, for instance, is so critically important. To understand the needs of our users and to sometimes also educate our users. I mean, that we are talking about, Gaby talked about the importance of data literacy. I think that is absolutely critically important. I even sometimes call it, we need a new data culture where we all understand not only how data have to be interpreted, because a data item in itself sometimes is not good or bad necessarily. It is the fitness for purpose. I mean, I sometimes use the example, if you get a tweet from an African village that a whole lot of people are looking very sick there, that is not a data element upon which you may want to build a 10-year health policy for that country. But you may very, very well want to use that data item to as a red flag to point towards a short-term intervention. Is there a new epidemic perhaps coming around in that particular moment from that particular place? So the fitness for purpose, what do we do? What do we use it for, is becoming critically important. And to be honest, I think we are collectively figuring this out. I don't think anybody has the truth yet. I mean, that we know how to do this, and also the game around us, the possibilities with IT and data management change by the second, literally. So I think this is why these kind of dialogues are critically important. So the producers, the users, we all sit together and we get more engaged. I mean, and the statisticians also, I always say a really good data item is not one that got triple and quadruple checked, but a really good data item is one that was responsibly and effectively used. So I think that's the ultimate purpose of what we are producing. And of course, producing data costs money ultimately also. So, I mean, we are also increasingly under the gun of justifying why we are spending so much money and what is it good for in the end. So it is a little bit troublesome, but I think we are on the right way.
All right. Many thanks, Stefan. There is a comment in the chat that I find interesting. It's from Paloma Martin, and she's saying that often trust in data depends on the trust in the general trust in ecosystem, and that trust in institutions in general, they contribute to trust also in data. So I think here we have with the UN system and with the EU system institutions that are reliable, and therefore people are trusting what you are producing. I think it's a very valid comment. I come now to Giulio and first ask him if he had a final point to share, a slide to share that we missed. And there is also a question that you might find interesting in that context. It's a question coming from somebody from the EPRS, Hannah Ahmad Mataladi, and she's asking, in your work, if you think that there is a risk in oversimplifying data and issues, because you might have the temptation to represent things in a simple way to make it accessible, and how far can you go in that direction? And if it's for you a question of ethics. Over to you, Giulio.
Thank you. Sorry for the problem before. I have another computer now, should work properly. Let's forget about the PowerPoint presentation. But first, let me just close my little speech I was having before. In the last example, my goal was to try to show how, with the simple, small things from our side, our as data user, data scientist, or as we want to call it, what are the small things that we can do to gain trust from the readers. And at the end of the story, what I wanted to highlight is that, as I said, reliable sources such as Eurostat, UN, and so on, is one of the first things. But also properly representation, clear message, clear labels in the graph, consistency in colors. If you use the same things, female and male in different graphs, you still use the same type of color. But also adding small text that help to understand the messages you want to try to give, because we need to also think that not everybody reads data, but a lot of people read data. Someone reads tables, someone reads graphs, someone reads text, someone reads a bit all together. So if we want to get more people understanding the data and our message, we should complete it with a bit of text. And this part of text is also, which has been mentioned before, this strange word that the people quite hate, which is methodology, is one of the most important things ever in data analysis, data collection, and so on. If we as data user, data scientists, we don't understand the data, well, our message will be always wrong. So I think that all of these elements together, which are small parts, small elements from our side, give trust to the users. I wanted to close my speech with another small wisdom. So if you allowed me, I will tell it, because this time from the 20th centuries, and which was from Hans Rosling. Probably everybody knows, I'm sure, a Swedish statistician. He said, the world cannot be understood without numbers, and it cannot be understood with numbers alone. And I think after all the discussion we are having, it fits very well. So thank you for the time that you gave me. Sorry for the mess up with the computer. Now I'd like to answer to this question of risk of oversimplifying the things. I have to say that one of my points that I wanted to make in my speech was simplicity is important. But the simplicity is true that too much simple could be a risk. But imagine you do an infographic, you have simple elements that together make a complex or make a better understanding of your message. Well, I think that's the way that we should try to, we as a data visualizer, infographist and so on, we should go. And I have to say, I always try to, build my message starting from simple element. And if you look then, it's true, there are a lot of things in my paper, there are a lot of data, but my idea is always to start for simple things. So I like the keep it simple concept that at the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giulio. I'd like to jump in now to an issue that was raised by Gaby in her presentation, and namely on the science politics interface, and ask her how can we increase the institutional capacity to select and evaluate and process data in policy making? How can we increase this capacity? And if you could, I mean, the European Parliament, the challenges that we have, our work on better lawmaking and on evaluation, and what would you suggest there?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Etienne. So I do think that this question is potentially for the institutions, for the big ones, one of the most important these days, because it goes into the administrative understanding itself, and to what Stefan said, the establishment of data cultures within institutions. And that is subject to different conceptualizations. The Joint Research Center, for example, established 8 clusters of data literacy that institutions can follow. When we want to establish a data culture within institutions and capitalize on science policy interfaces, and obviously there are different ways to go, the way that the Parliament went, scienticization, so establish scientific analysis at the heart of data use in the institution, externally and internally. Some go for politicization, work together with foundations, with political, with partisan institutions. But I do think one thing that I guess from my point of view, personally and institutionally, is most important is the openness. Openness to engage one with the other. So take on board experts, try to lower the barriers of cooperation, also between science and policymaking, because we can learn a lot from each other. And I'm not just talking one-directional science to policy. Having contributed to the work of EPRS, sharpened my understanding of how data needs to be used. It can also help science to improve their contribution. So when we talk about community of practice ideas, right, as the Joint Research Center established in the Commission with the scientific advice environments for policymaking community, this is important to bring people together, to establish personal links, to define and discuss about the importance of policymaking and the ways to improve products, own products, to prepare joint products. So I'm very much here underlining what Stefan said about the cooperation element. I want to make one point on the user side, the question that you raised before, and that goes a bit into the not that much demand, but supply side, and shines a light on the relevance of statistical institutions, official statistical institutions. Actually, when we look into data as a public good, and we link that to the debate that we're having to lift the right to own data to a human right, one actually needs to question what Madame KOTZEVA underlined, the problem access to big data. Because this is a resource. It could be a revenue resource for states in the future. We are losing something if we are only looking at the use on the demand side. So also the question on how we deal with big data as a public good is an important point, but that just as a contribution to the data use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaby, for this comment, and also for bringing in the question of big data and the fact that data is not always in the hands of governments. Now there are questions on misinformation or disinformation, and I'd like also the panel to be able to react to this, whatever we call it. But how do you see a role for official statistics in combating disinformation? And why is the use of data in policy making often perceived as problematic or value-laden? I'd like to add also, if you in UNSTAT or in Eurostat think about some correcting data that are wrongly projected in the public debate, if you like, proactively engage in checking and correcting, and what is your interaction with the public, and so it's just pushing data, but also correcting sometimes mistakes in newspapers, in televisions, and so on. And if you have thought about this, thank you. I don't know if Mariana or Stefan wants to react first. Maybe reverse order this time, Stefan.
Yeah, no, thank you. I would say to answer directly to your last question, I mean, probably not nearly enough. But I had mentioned before, I mean, we need to get more engaged. I mean, we can't take it to the level to become a universal data police, and I mean, I just don't have the resources for that. But I mean, of course, we have, if somebody attributes something directly to us and does it incorrectly, we immediately respond. But I think those are perhaps the minor accidents and so that happen. I think what really the big problems are, I mean, that sometimes people purposefully misrepresent things. And I wanted to say something about your question earlier, the simplification. I mean, data is always a simplification of a complex reality. I mean, when we take numbers is a projection of an awfully complex reality all around us into n dimensions, n being the numbers, the number of numbers that you have available. You can have a vector of 1,000 pieces of information on a country that tells you something, and if you're only allowed to convey one piece of information, what is it going to be? I mean, the average life expectancy or the GDP per capita or something like that. But even with one piece of information, you can do some information. So, I mean, I don't know, oversimplification. Again, we're coming back to the fitness for purpose. What is it? What is the situation? Maybe we need to be aware that numbers are always a simplification. That comes also back to what Rosling said. You can never describe the whole world just with numbers, even if you have many, many numbers. We are just too damned complex, fortunately, I would say. But I mean, we just have to be aware of the situation. I mean, and then act accordingly. And I think we are getting more involved in a discussion about data culture and also data literacy. And I think that's a good thing. As I said, we are not stopping of just putting the data out there. But we are not nearly doing enough, I will be honest about it. And we also don't have the skill sets yet. I mean, I just realized, I mean, data communication and having a communication strategy together with a big event, for instance, on World Data Forum or something like that, that is something that is relatively new to us. I mean, we had to learn also, engage with the users, speak the different languages, and even users are categorizable. I mean, it's different whether you talk to a policy user like a parliamentarian or to a journalist or to a civil society advocate. I mean, those are at least that are already 3 different languages I have to add to my learning portfolio. But it ultimately has to be done. Yeah.
Thank you, Stefan. Mariana?
Thank you very much. This is also a very interesting topic which has appeared on our agenda highly in the recent years, the topic about the role of national statistical institutes and Eurostat in fighting against disinformation. And certainly we have taken some steps. I could give you a very concrete example. During the European Parliament elections, the last round, you remember it was 2019, yes? When there was a lot of fears, this was just post-truth era, it was famous. So there was, in Europe, there were a lot of initiatives to prevent disinformation. And on the positive side, a lot of fact-checking organizations and network of fact-checking organizations was put in place. And Eurostat established partnership with the fact-checking organizations, and we made us available with dedicated user support in case that these fact-checkers find some let's say incorrect numbers, and what we did, we offered to them opportunity to check some numbers, and in partnerships with them, this was our involvement in fight against disinformation. And we continue since then to have this kind of partnership. What I just wanted to stress here, this is an opportunity for me to say that the privilege of statistical profession is, as Stefan said, this is a kind of family. And this is maybe one of the rare professions in the world where you really have a cooperation. You cannot exist without cooperation, because in order to make statistics usable and comparable, you need to set standards, same definitions, concepts, methodologies. But at the same time, being in this community, one of, I will use the word fundamental principle, is of exchanging best practices, learning from each other, working as a system. And in Europe, it's really a system, European statistical system. Therefore, when we have an issue to tackle, we usually establish quickly a task force, a brainstorming, where the countries could put their experiences together, and Eurostat is the focal point when this experience are transferred in guidelines or some handbook compilation of good practices. So we have such a task force on this information, and very soon, maybe in coming 1 month, we will publish guidelines for the role of national statistical institutes in this information, which I elaborated together with the member states. And why I'm mentioning this, because I don't know whether Stefan will agree with me, but these things on disinformation or wrong numbers mostly happen at national level, because the numbers appear at national level first, and then you know, they are clean until they arrive to Eurostat. Of course, it's not excluded that Eurostat is referred as a source and the number is wrong, but this is, let's say, to a less extent. So in a nutshell, the national statistical offices are more exposed to this disinformation challenge. Therefore, our idea to have best practices, common guidelines, common policies to learn from each other was the perceived way to do that. Final point on disinformation, what is very important, in my opinion, in today's work and the presence of social media, is through the data literacy and through social media, our own accounts. Eurostat has Instagram, Facebook, Twitter accounts, to encourage people to inform us, to come back if they have seen any wrong numbers, or they have some doubts about misuse or disinformation related to our own numbers. So this means to empower citizens to work with data, and this means to increase the statistical literacy, and for us, for official statisticians, to use this asset, the asset of people, of citizens, in order to fight against disinformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. Gaby, a remark on this, which will be also a final one?
Very quickly, from an institutional point of view, potentially also EPRS, to reduce asymmetries in knowledge, which we obviously with the work of EPRS are doing. Second point, to structure knowledge transfer in a way that is transparent to users. That is super important, so that they see how evidence is translated, what are the official sources, as Giulio said, always the trustworthy official sources. Also engage with the data providers as an institution to show what we're doing, our products are reliable, and by doing so to try and mitigate polarization of evidence in the products. That's, I think, from an institutional point of view, is very important.
Thank you very much, Gaby, and thank you to all panelists. With this, we come to the end of this discussion, this roundtable. I think we covered a lot of ground, the question of trust on data, and of course that we need good data, the question, the importance of representation to make data exciting and understandable. Everything what was said about standards as an enabler rather than a force jacket, and also what Gaby said to us as to make us thinking about the fact that quantification is never neutral, and that it has a meaning, and that we should keep thinking about this all the time, and the importance of openness and awareness, and finally, certainly, communication and cooperation. And I'm sure this is only one of the first, even I think it's the first time that we as EPRS engage officially with UNSTAT and with Eurostat, and I'm sure there will be other occasions. Before handing over to Anthony to conclude, I'd just like to mention that in the chat we have two reference to two publications, the one of Gaby on data evidence in the 21st century, and our own EPRS publication on 10 indexes for policy making. It's actually a very interesting compilation of indexes that are either UN or other organizations on policy making, and I think they can be useful for all of us. Many thanks also to the online audience that has been today very active in pushing questions and helping us to go this way of the conversation. And I hand over to Anthony to conclude and to announce the next EPRS event. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you very much indeed, Etienne, and thank you to our panelists, to Mariana, to Stefan, to Gaby, and to Giulio. Also to those who perhaps less visible behind the scenes who helped put this kind of event together. It's one of a series which we are doing. It's, as I mentioned earlier, the second already in this new parliamentary autumn term. And our next EPRS event will be on Tuesday, the 21st of September, so just under 2 weeks from now. It'll be our first book talk of the autumn. And some of you may recall David Harley, who retired from the European Parliament administration about a decade ago. He's now produced his memoirs, Matters of Record Inside European Politics, 1992 to 2010. And he's going to be in conversation with our Secretary General, Klaus Welle, at lunchtime, as I say, on Tuesday, the 21st of September. So that's something to look forward to. And we will be having a lot of other events during the course of the autumn, some book talks, some public policy roundtables of this kind, and a special theme for the autumn of thinking about the future, because one of the effects, I think, of the current crisis, and I see today is the day when the European Commission has published its second annual foresight report, is the sense of importance in engaging in strategic foresight and thinking about future risks, capabilities, resilience of the European Union and indeed the Western system more widely. Anyway, statistics, data and trust, very stimulating, a great discussion. Thank you to everybody who participated as part of the panel. Thank you to those who asked questions, and thank you to all of you who were online watching, and indeed those who will watch in the future, because all of our EPRS events are permanently on the European Parliament website and on YouTube, and they provide an opportunity for this discussion to diffuse much more widely over time. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the evening, and goodbye.